Hello and welcome to another edition of UpFront Takes. This is episode 7 of the YouTube series. I have another guest here. I have Nick Kydon, who is the brother of Alexis, who's been doing all the tremendous podcasts with us. Nick, thanks for joining me today, and I'm excited to talk some hockey with you.
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Daniel? Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And you know what, man? I'm pumped that hockey's finally coming back.
Yeah, me too. Anyone who's watching this who doesn't know Nick, if you knew him for 10 minutes, you'd already know he is one of the biggest Devils fans you can find around. But let's get right into things. 15 minutes, I'll put on the timer. And first question, we saw yesterday Corey Crawford taking a personal leave, getting away from the team for a little bit. How do you think this is going to affect the goalie situation? Wedgwood has a little bit of experience as a backup, but what is your confidence level in Scott Wedgwood?
Yeah, no, that was definitely he took a couple personal days, the few days before that, so you kind of got the sense that something was brewing. Weren't really sure. I've heard in the past there was some issues in Chicago with concussions and things like that. But I think right now the fact that they have a goaltender locked up into a contract with Mackenzie Blackwood is huge for them because we don't know what's going to be happening with Corey Crawford. He's on a good contract right now. I think he's earned the contract that he's at. It's at, I believe, $2.3 million for the next 3 years. So that's definitely huge. He's really proved himself over the last couple of years. The Devils' goaltending situation, kind of since Brodeur left, has been a little up in the air. They had Corey Schneider, who, in my opinion, they wasted his prime years by surrounding him with such a god-awful team offensively and defensively. Schneider, for some of those years that he was with us, people said, maybe he could be a Vezina contender. I mean, he was outstanding, and then since then they've had trouble finding a goaltender. They threw Scott Wedgwood in there for a little while. Then they threw Blackwood in there for a little while. But I definitely think that Blackwood has earned this contract. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. Especially this season with it being a little bit different. He's going to be seeing the same teams a lot more often. So, as good as other teams are in the league or in the division that they're going to be playing in, it could be to his advantage that he sees these teams so often and he could figure out more what each team likes to do, their play style, the different opponents or the shooters' tendencies. So it's really big that they were able, to lock him up. And I do think that he has earned this contract.
Yeah, that's a good thing to talk about. Blackwood, who has kind of been a little underrated. I mean, I look at his stats over his first couple of seasons. He's been a quality goalie. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You talk about last season where he had 8 losses in overtime and in shootouts. And those are most of the time, those are just tough luck losses where you're getting on either – you're facing such good puck handlers in those shootouts, or in overtime losses, you're in a situation where it's 2-1-1 or 2-1-0 when you have those 3-on-3 overtime situations. So the fact that he's played well enough to get the team into overtime situations shows you that he just needs a couple breaks to go his way. And he could have easily had anywhere from, 4 to 8 more wins than he had in the past season. So I think it's a very good thing that the Devils are rolling with him. And I think Crawford being out the beginning of the season, he doesn't have that sort of veteran presence looking over his shoulder so that if he struggles or anything like that, that they're more inclined to let Blackwood sort of take a little more bumps and bruises before they make a goalie change. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said, just to with the stats with the 8 overtime losses, and like you mentioned, when you get to those overtime periods or those shootouts, it's just, a bounce here or a bounce there, and the outcome is completely different. The one thing that does worry me a little bit about their goaltending situation is who they're going to bring if they need to, who they're going to bring up from Binghamton to back up to Mackenzie Blackwood. And then when you touched on, not having Crawford there in the veteran presence, Blackwood is still young. And, if it turns out that Crawford ends up, not playing at all this season, and then they bring up another young goalie. So you're stuck with 2 young goalies with no real veteran presence to kind of help them out in terms of the position and goalie. I'm sure, and that's where the goalie coach comes in and plays a huge role to help mentor these guys and develop them as they move along. And adding on to that, it's becomes kind of like a chain effect now. Binghamton will have to send somebody up if Crawford doesn't play, but then Binghamton's going to have to find somebody else. And, it's just a whole chain effect. So, I wish Corey Crawford the best. I hope everything's okay. And, I hope he does come back, with the right mindset and healthy and everything. But again, I'm happy with Blackwood. I feel confident in Blackwood. Like I said, he's shown some real good, he's had some really great games. So another thing that I really liked about him was that whenever he felt like he had a bad game or he cost the team the game, he always put it on himself, which, you don't always see with goaltenders. So that's great. So no, I'm definitely happy with the Blackwood situation.
Yeah. And Blackwood's he's still a young guy too. It's not like this is a guy who's already pushing his 30s. He's still very young.
Yes.
And I think I'm going to be excited one of the goalies to look for really in that Eastern Division. But speaking of missing personnel for the Devils, Jesper Bratt doesn't have a contract, not on the roster at the moment. This was a guy who made a big goal improvement in the prior 2 seasons. He had 25 assists in his second season. His assist numbers lowered, but he scored more goals. So how do you think the Devils are going to sort of move forward in a year where they don't have a preseason? So they're sort of just trying to run things out on the fly before we get into game action.
Yeah, so definitely one thing that kind of stinks about the whole Jesper Bratt situation is that he's a restricted free agent. So the Devils have retained his rights no matter what. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's going on right now is that in order for him to get a visa to come over to the United States, he needs to have a contract. And, from everything that I'm reading and hearing is that the two sides are extremely far apart from each other. It's kind of once it seems to be contracts or length of contract and the amount of money that both sides cannot agree on. The Devils kind of were in a similar situation with Miles Wood before they gave him a 4-year contract. So in terms of someone like dealing with that, not dealing with Jesper or not having Jesper Bratt, like I just mentioned, I think Miles Wood or Pavel Zacha are some 2 players that may need to step up. You can see things with one thing that Jesper Bratt provides is speed and some good stick handling skills. Miles Wood is somebody who I'm sure all Devils fans and even some hockey fans will know that he is very fast. Not always the most coordinated skater and will sometimes, kind of just run right into the wall. But he is very fast and you can use that to his advantage. And then you have another person like Pavel Zacha, who's been with us for quite a few years and has his up and down moments. Sometimes I think with the Devils, when they had John Hines as their coach, he kind of messed with his confidence a little bit. But I think Miles Wood and Pavel Zacha would be 2 guys that really need to step it up. And like I said, Miles Wood was in a similar situation as Jesper Bratt was, not the whole visa thing, but in terms of the contract length and the money. The 2 sides eventually came to a agreement, but Miles Wood, I wouldn't say has fully lived up to his contract yet. Definitely still needs to work on a couple of things. So maybe the Devils are trying to learn their lesson from the Miles Wood situation and apply it right here to Jesper Bratt. So something tells me the Devils are looking for more of a short-term contract to kind of like a prove yourself contract, right, where Jesper Bratt is kind of looking towards maybe the job security, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with the Devils, they sort of remind me of what my favorite basketball team is, the Knicks, where you have a bunch of young guys, some of them proven, some of them unproven yet, but they all have the potential of a great group of young players that the Devils can build around. They have it with their goalie. They have it on defense with their first-round pick, and they have plenty on offense. So in such a tough division, what are your expectations for the Devils to finish in the Eastern Division this year?
Yeah, man, this is a tough one. Like you said, they're a very young team. To add on top of that, they have a brand new coach this year, Lindy Ruff. So it's, unfortunately, I can't say I have very high expectations this year for this team. They're dealing with a couple things. Like you said, the Crawford thing is something. The Jesper Bratt thing is another thing they're dealing with. Nico Hischier at the beginning of training camp missed a little bit because he was dealing with a little bit of an injury. You always worry about, some of these injuries lingering or players rushing to get back too fast. And then on top of that, they're in the Eastern Conference. I know obviously the divisions are completely different this year due to the pandemic and everything, but in past years, the Western Conference, maybe about 5 to 7 years ago, Western Conference was seen as the powerhouse of the league. And I really think it shifted from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference now. The Devils, it was in the Metropolitan Division before, but now they're just called the East Division. And, they play in a division that, has a mix of young, fast teams like the Rangers and the Islanders, who were both in the playoffs last year, even though it was a different playoff format. And then you also have a mix of big, strong veteran teams who might not be as fast, but when you get into those battles in the corners, they'll throw their body around and they'll lay some heavy hits. Teams like the Boston Bruins and teams like the Washington Capitals, who, obviously have Ovechkin. The Bruins have guys like Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, who gets underneath everyone's skin. So I'm hoping that it's not a last place finish. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish last in the division. But who knows what could happen. But again, due to them just being in such a powerhouse division with just a mix of all these really talented teams that have different things to offer. And like I said, one of the big things is the players learning a new system under Coach Lindy Ruff. So my expectations aren't too high, but we'll see what happens. You never know what can happen.
Right.
But I'm kind of preparing for the worst, hoping for the best.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the Young Devils in this division, it sort of reminds me of a couple years ago when they did make the playoffs and they surprised everybody. I think they're a little bit of an advantage because you have all these older players who are so used to a training camp and a preseason that now they're just going into it, no preseason, none of that. And all these young guys can sort of take advantage of that. So even if someone told me that I think the Devils can make the playoffs, I wouldn't say that's crazy. There's 4 teams getting in, so you have a 50% chance realistically of making it with 4 spots in there. So I think if they start off strong, that could be an advantage to them because they're young guys. They're not really used to the every year grind that some of these older guys talk about. A guy like Ovechkin, talk about guys like Panarin on the Rangers, like you said, Marchand as well. So it's going to be a lot different. But I do like this new division alignment. I think you have a rivalry pretty much every night. We talk about Wednesday night rivalry on NBC. You have, you can have Rangers, Devils, Bruins. It's so many different rivalries that you're getting pretty much every single game. I personally like it, and I wouldn't be mad if this was the format that moved on past this season.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's completely, again, it's a new format for everybody. And like you said, there is almost a rivalry game every single night. They're going to be playing the Rangers a lot. They're going to be playing the Islanders a lot. Those are 2 teams right there. And then you have the other teams like the Capitals and the Bruins. To an extent, I like it because I think for a young team like the Devils, it could really pay off, playing against this higher level competition. Almost every single night, you're going to be playing somebody who could easily, make their way all the way to a conference final or even a Stanley Cup final. So I do like it. Another thing that I really like about it is the fact that most games or all the games will start at 7:00. So there's no waiting up until 10 o'clock at night just to watch the Devils get pummeled by the Ducks or somebody like that. So no, I think it's good to the extent that you will be playing high competition. You'll have high competition games every single night. But also, like I just said before, it's kind of bad in the fact that I don't have too much confidence right now in the team to win every single game. But, like you said, one thing that I definitely really do like is the rivalry aspect that you get every single night. And, also another thing I saw was that with the pandemic and, the no fans and the NHL losing out on a ton of money and, it doesn't take an expert to know that the NHL is probably not the most popular sport amongst the four major sports. So one thing I did like that they did was they found sponsorships for each division. So any way to get some money for the league, so we can try to avoid a lockout or something like that. I think it'll be interesting when playoffs come around for these divisions because, if they continue to do the regular playoff brackets like they have been, you could almost go a whole season without, playing somebody who you're going to match up against in the first round or in the second round. And, the playoffs are always a toss up. You just got to get right at the hot time, especially in the NHL. But this year it could be even more of a toss-up more than ever because you may play a team that you didn't play all season, and then you're in a 4-game series with them in the conference final or the semifinal. So I think it'll make for some really enjoyable hockey and fun hockey to watch.
Yeah, I think when you talked about getting to the playoffs and not even facing a team you've seen before, that sort of your scouting department's really gonna make their big bucks in those situations. But last thing before we get off here, Doc Emrick, the great NBC Stanley Cup broadcaster, stepping down, retiring after a long, great career. Off the top of your head, or if you have someone in mind, who would be the best guy to replace him on those Stanley Cup or those national TV games that NBC does?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, Doc is going to be missed greatly. I know some people don't like him, but he got to start with the Devils and everything, and then so I love him for that. But I honestly think John Forsland, who was with the Carolina Hurricanes, I forget if he still is or not, but he's got a great goal call. He's enthusiastic about every single. Pretty much all the parts of the whenever the game is going on, he's enthusiastic about everything. He's got that great booming voice, and it's also a unique voice. He's got some great catchphrases that he uses that I just never get tired of hearing. I don't know if NBC is going to go that way. Unfortunately, I remember a few years ago when Doc couldn't do some Stanley Cup final games when the Rangers were playing the Kings. They quickly gave it to Kenny Albert. I'm not a big Kenny Albert person. I think he kind of lacks a little bit of emotion in his calls. I also think his calls are delayed sometimes. Like something will happen and then he won't give it to you until a couple seconds after. And then, unfortunately, another person that I would have loved to see was Dave Strader. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago from cancer, I believe it was. But he would have been another guy that I would have loved to hear get that chance. But if I had to go with that, I would. If I had to pick one person, I would definitely go with John Forsland because I think just he's got the great catchphrases, great goal calls, and he's enthusiastic, which is what you want to hear when you're watching a hockey game.
Yeah, for me, I would probably pick, I don't think this is a realistic move for NBC, but Gary Thorne, he used to do so many of those great Stanley Cup series back when they were on ABC.
Yep.
He's such a terrific broadcaster for the Baltimore Orioles. I don't know how realistic that is. To me, I think their more realistic decision will probably be like Mike Tirico, someone like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I like his work for basketball. I heard him do a couple hockey games maybe a couple of years ago. I didn't even know he could do hockey, but I think he's a more realistic option. He may also replace Al Michaels for the Sunday Night Football game. So I think NBC may just try to go the whole Joe Buck course, the same way Fox uses Joe Buck for everything. Mm-hmm. That might be the same thing that I see NBC do with Mike Tirico.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. And I honestly forgot about Tirico that he did hockey a couple of times. And just real quick on the Gary Thorne thing, Gary Thorne was on all the old NHL video games. So when I started playing, that was the first play-by-play voice that I really was familiar with. So, to some of the older fans or something like that, Gary Thorne might be actually a really good person to have to call the games.
Either way, whoever steps in there is going to have huge shoes to fill for the great Doc Emrick. But all right, so our 15 minutes is up. Now I'll give you 15 seconds. Any sports prediction or anything you want to say about the Devils, uninterrupted, 15 seconds. It's all yours.
All right. Well, to any Devils fans listening right now, I probably just like you, I'm a little sick of hearing about the rebuilds and continually going through it almost every single year, it sounds like. But I'm hoping that we find some stability moving forward. And I hope that we get back to the playoffs soon. And most importantly, I hope that we can get back to the Rock to cheer on our Devils.
Yeah, I think for the Devils, I think stability is on the way. I think it's starting this year. I think there's a plenty of good young pieces in place. So, it's going to be exciting to watch them play in that very, very tough Eastern Division. But Nick, thank you for joining me this week on UpFront Takes. Everyone who watched, follow us on Twitter at sportsupfront_. Same thing on Instagram as well. Give us a like on the YouTube video, and we'll be speaking to you all